I'd like to take a minute to introduce my co-presenters. This is Marie. She's a raven, and this is Tommy. He's a cat. And before I tell you more about them, I'm just going to tell you a brief story about how this project started. This fall, I traveled to New Mexico with Karen Waldron and Catherine Klinger during COA's New Mexico course. And in Santa Fe, I was in a shop, and a man was selling Zuni fetish carvings, which are stone animals that are said to hold a spirit inside of them. And the man selling this fetishes said to me, a fetish will pick its keeper. And I was chosen by this red-winged blackbird. And when I got my fetish home, I began to wonder, how can an object choose the person it lives with? How can an object, if it can choose a person, how does it have personality? It must, if it can choose someone. And that led to the large question of, how can an object hold life? Does an object hold life because of the place it comes from, the way it's made? Does it hold life because of the stories that are put into it? Can it hold narrative? So I began to research fetish carvings further, and I also began researching kachina dolls, which are wooden dolls, another Native American art, that are also vessels for spirit. So Marie was one of the figures I created last fall in response to this large question of how does an object hold life? And I really wanted my project to be hands-on, so I decided I could read about this and look at these figures, but I wanted to see for myself if I could make an object that held life. Another figure inspired by New Mexico was my lizard, Lloyd. He couldn't make it today. He's at home. So I wanted to tell you more about this process. I was so enchanted by making these two figurines, Lloyd and Marie, returning from New Mexico, and I wanted to continue this project as my senior project and make more of these animals and read more about objects that hold life, go and look at them, research them. So I also kind of brought in puppetry as well, which was a course I took the previous spring with Professor Nancy Andrews. So these animals are designed in a way that's similar to a rod puppet, but are in the spirit of a kachina doll or a Zuni fetish carving because they hold life. They're not performative like a puppet is. So how do I start? I start with a block of wood. I used mostly white pine or basswood, and then I go ahead and take away larger pieces of wood and then go in with a hand carving knife and carve the rest of the figurine's head. Once the head is completed, it gets put onto a dowel. Then I have to find the correct stone. All of the figures that I made are seated, so they need to be weighted. Here are three of the figurine heads up on their stones, so sort of the beginning of their bodies at this point. Next, I had to decide what the figurines were going to wear, and that's when a lot of the personality sort of became apparent, when they started to be clothed and their bodies were really filling out. So here's a slide. You can see, yeah, making clothes. And then the last step was deciding what kind of eyes would a figurine have. In Tommy's case, he has whiskers and a nose. And that was naturally just the last step. I thought about these animals coming into the world, and naturally their eyes would be the last thing to open up. And then at that point, I really felt like I was seeing them for the first time, and they were looking back at me. So here is my collection of 9 animal figurines. The next step was to share these figurines with the rest of the community. So I had an installation in the Blum Gallery on campus during week 4 of this spring term. So here's a poster for the event. I wanted to explore these animals further because I realized in the exhibit I wasn't going to give a talk, I wasn't going to go through my whole process with people, so I needed to figure out a visual way to sort of bring these objects to life and give them more depth. So I chose to make a series of 9 linoleum relief prints, and their portraits of each animal to sort of show them in a space. So here's a picture of the blum all set up with all of the animals on their figurines. Here's Claire. She's a hummingbird. And these objects are extremely personal. One of the things about Kachina dolls is that they connect ancestors, and they hold the spirit, as I already said. And my figurines were largely inspired by my own ancestors. So I was trying to sort of connect this time, the present, to the past. And that's what I discovered that sort of made these animals magical, and what made them feel alive was this ability to move between realms. They're not stuck in the present. They can move from the past and into the future, and that's sort of this what gives them life, and that's the narrative they hold. And finally, I chose to make a series of black and white photographs modeled after 1920s photography of students holding the animals, because I also, in the showing, wanted to show this personal interaction between human and object, which was sort of where the basis of the project began. So, thank you for your time.